Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is January 17th, 2026. And I want to start today just by, looking at the calendar. Sometimes we get so caught up in the daily grind, the sort of tick-tock of the news, that we miss the moment the tectonic plates actually shift.
Yeah.
And looking at the sources we have today on the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea, it really feels like we're standing on one of those shifting plates right now.
It really does. We often look at these conflicts in isolation. The civil war in Sudan is one story. Tensions in Somalia, that's another.
Right, separate headlines.
Exactly. But the material we're diving into today suggests that is the absolute wrong way to look at it. There's a massive reformulation of power happening, and it's happening right now.
Exactly. It feels like chaos on the surface. You've got drones, contested borders, all of that. But our main source today argues that out of this chaos, a very specific, very powerful order is trying to emerge. We're looking at a piece published today, January 17th, in Egypt, by Khaled Mohammed Taha. The title is a bit of a mouthful, but it says it all. Sudan, in the heart of the battle for regional balances and Red Sea security.
It's a heavy read, but it's incredibly revealing.
Taha isn't just giving us a battle update. He's mapping out a new geopolitical triangle.
Right.
We're seeing this crystallization of an alliance between Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Eritrea. And the argument here is they've come together to physically stop the region from collapsing.
So that's our mission today. We're going to unpack this new alliance and look at why Sudan has become this central node for the entire region. But before we get into the fighting, I want to pause on this new triangle.
Okay.
Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Eritrea. Historically, these three haven't exactly been best friends. They've had their differences, to put it mildly. What kind of pressure forces these players into the same trench?
That's the key question, isn't it? Is what makes this whole thing so significant. You just don't see this level of coordination unless the alternative is, well, a catastrophe. So it's a marriage of necessity.
Pure and simple. But what's fascinating is the nature of it. Taha points out this isn't just a reactive, panicked move. It's not firefighting.
Okay.
He describes it as a strategic attempt based on partnership. The core idea they're working with is that Red Sea security cannot be left to foreign interventions or, unilateral moves by outside powers.
So a kind of by the neighborhood for the neighborhood approach?
Precisely. They're saying the security of the Horn of Africa has to be managed by the countries that actually live on the coast. And the source breaks down the division of labor in a really interesting way.
Oh, yeah. How so?
It's almost like a business merger. Everyone brings a specific asset to the table.
Okay, let's break that down. Who brings what?
So let's start with Eritrea. Taha calls them the geographic pivot.
Location.
It's all about location. They hold that strategic coastline on the African side of the southern Red Sea. Without them, you just don't control the choke point.
Okay. But Eritrea is a smaller nation, so Saudi Arabia brings what?
Saudi Arabia provides the weight, the diplomatic influence, and, let's be honest, the economic engine. They're the heavy hitter.
Right.
If Saudi Arabia says, this is the plan, the world listens. And then you've got Egypt.
The military power.
Exactly. The military capabilities, the strategic guarantees. So you combine Eritrea's geography, Saudi Arabia's diplomatic and economic muscle, and Egypt's military strategy, and you have a triad that can actually enforce its will.
That sounds less like a temporary fix and more like they're trying to rewrite the regional power map entirely. It's proactive.
It is, and it's a direct response to the fear that if they don't do this, the region will be shaped by imposed solutions from the outside.
Which brings us to the eye of the storm, Sudan. You can't talk about Red Sea security in 2026 without it. And the source makes a bold claim here. It says Sudan is no longer just a theater of internal war. It's become the central node.
And that shift in language is crucial. A theater is just a stage, a node. A node is what connects everything else. If the node fails, the whole network crashes.
So let's get into the situation on the ground today, January 2026. The source paints a picture of a war that's shifting. What's actually happening with the Sudanese army and the RSF?
Well, according to Taha's analysis, the momentum has definitely swung. The Sudanese army has moved from being on the defense to what he calls an organized offense.
Oh, okay.
They're reordering their ranks, pushing back. And on the flip side, the RSF is suffering from erosion.
Erosion? In what sense? Just running out of steam?
It's deeper than that. It's erosion in command and control, and crucially, in their supply lines. And this is where it gets really interesting if you're following the map.
Go on.
The RSF is trying to open a new front in the Blue Nile region. in the southeast.
Wait, zoom in on that. The Blue Nile.
Hmm.
The RSF's strength has always been in the west, Darfur, and so on. The Blue Nile is way over in the southeast. Why would they do that? If you're losing the center, why stretch yourself even thinner?
It seems counterintuitive, right?
Right.
But the source argues this move is actually a sign of desperation.
Desperate.
Think of it like a cornered animal looking for any exit. The RSF's traditional supply lines, they come through the western borders, Chad specifically.
And the source implies those doors are slamming shut.
Slamming shut and being locked. These regional understandings he mentions, as diplomatic speak for backroom deals, have choked off those western routes. So the RSF is suffocating.
So they're pushing east because they have no other choice.
You need a new lung.
Yep.
They need a border that's still porous enough to get supplies in. The walls are closing in from the west.
Wow. And that just highlights how effective this regional coordination might be.
It does, and it connects right back to that new triangle. The consensus among Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Eritrea is that the collapse or partition of Sudan is just, it's not an option.
Because if the RSF holds power or if the country splits, you have permanent instability right in the middle of your central node.
Right, and that instability breeds other threats. Which brings us to one of the most alarming parts of the source material, the technology.
Oh, yeah. This part really caught my attention. The source calls Sudan a testing ground, a laboratory for modern warfare. Now, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Please.
We hear this about every modern conflict, right? Ukraine, Gaza, everyone says their war is the testing ground. Is Sudan actually different?
That's a fair pushback. But the distinction Taha draws here is about proliferation. In Ukraine, you have state actors using high-tech drones in a, well, relatively controlled environment.
Okay.
In Sudan, the fear is what you could call the supermarket effect.
Meaning anyone with cash can buy in.
Exactly. The analysis points out that sophisticated drone tech in Sudan isn't just shifting the battlefield, it's becoming cheap and accessible to non-state actors. The alliance isn't just worried about who wins the battle.
They're worried the Horn of Africa is becoming a bargain bin for advanced weaponry.
Precisely. And once that genie is out of the bottle in a region this unstable, good luck putting it back in. They want to prevent the militarization of the entire Horn.
It's the Pandora's box theory. You open it in Khartoum, and suddenly you have problems in Cairo, in Riyadh.
And speaking of problems spilling over, we have to talk about the other crisis the text mentions, Ethiopia and its moves in Somaliland.
Right. You can't look at Sudan in a vacuum. How does the source connect the war in Sudan to that?
It connects them through the idea of sovereignty and maps. To the average person, the Ethiopia-Somaliland deal might just look like a port dispute. But to this new Egypt-Saudi-Eritrea alliance, it is a five-alarm fire.
Because it violates the MAPS rule.
It violates the sacred rule of African politics. You do not redraw borders without permission. The alliance sees Ethiopia's move as a dangerous precedent. If Ethiopia can just carve out a piece of Somalia for a port, what stops someone else from carving out a piece of Sudan?
It's the broken window theory for international borders.
It is. They see the chaos in Sudan and the land grab politics in Somaliland as two heads of the same monster. That's why they're so obsessed with unity.
So if they let the map fracture in Somalia, it weakens their argument for unity in Sudan.
It completely undermines it. And for these countries, this isn't some abstract theory.
Right.
I mean, let's look at their motivations. Saudi Arabia sees the Red Sea as an extension of its national security. Egypt is worried about navigation, the Suez Canal, its economic lifeline.
And Eritrea.
Eritrea is right there. They know that any imbalance across the water in the Gulf of Aden directly hits their security. They're watching the other bank of the river, so to speak.
It's fascinating how all these different motivations lead to the same goal. Stop the chaos.
It is. And this brings us to the red line that the source really emphasizes.
Yeah, the article quotes the Eritrean president, Isaias Afwerki, from just a few days ago, January 12th. He seemed to think the international community is completely missing the point on Sudan.
He does. He basically said we can't just look at this as two generals fighting. He argues that's a superficial way to see it. He puts the crisis in a historical context going all the way back to 1956.
To Sudan's independence. So he's saying this is a 70-year-old problem.
It sounds like a stretch, but his point is about structural failure. He blames deep internal imbalances, but he also points the finger at external interference. He's saying outside powers have been trying to destabilize Sudan for decades to keep it weak.
And that all leads to the ultimate red line for this new alliance. What was the one thing they will not accept?
The unity of Sudan. That is absolutely non-negotiable. The source is very clear. Breaking Sudan into warring mini-states is seen as opening a gate of chaos.
A gate of chaos. That's a very specific, almost biblical-sounding
It
image.
is, but it's geopolitical. The fear is that if Sudan breaks, that chaos doesn't stay in Sudan. It would stretch from the Sahel all the way into the heart of the Middle East.
The buffer breaks.
The buffer breaks. You'd have a massive zone of lawlessness connecting unrest in West Africa directly to the Red Sea.
So when we see Egypt supporting the Sudanese army, it's not just about picking a side. It's because the alternative, a fractured Sudan, is an existential threat to them.
Exactly. They're trying to hold the state together because a failed state of that size, in that location, is a black hole that will suck in the entire region.
It really reframes the whole conflict, doesn't it? It's not just about who's in charge in Khartoum.
It's about whether the map of Northeast Africa holds together or shatters. And that is why this alliance is so important. It represents a real shift toward regional ownership.
So we're not waiting for the UN or the superpowers.
They're solving this because we live here.
It's a comprehensive reformulation of power equations, to use the source's language.
It is. It's a battle for order versus chaos. And right now, on January 17th, 2026, the alliance seems to be gaining some traction.
So let's zoom out as we wrap this up. What's the big takeaway here for all of us watching?
I think the takeaway is that we need to stop seeing these countries as just passive victims of circumstance. We are watching a new security bloc form that could define the region for decades. This is an assertive, coordinated effort to lock down the Red Sea.
A very bold move, and it leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to chew on.
It does. I mean, if this alliance succeeds, if they manage to stabilize Sudan and check Ethiopia's moves, they are effectively telling the rest of the world that the Red Sea is a closed lake for its coastal residents.
Putting up an under new management sign.
Basically. And that would be a massive geopolitical shift. We're talking one of the world's most important trade routes policed by a local coalition, not the U.S. Navy.
But what if they fail?
Exactly. Flip the coin. If they fail to hold the line on Sudan's unity, well, we might be looking at a map of Africa that looks completely different by the end of this decade.
Yeah.
And that is a terrifying prospect.
A terrifying prospect indeed, and one we will certainly be watching. I guess keep your eyes on that Blue Nile front.
Absolutely. That's the bellwether. The node is under pressure, and how it holds will determine everything.
Thank you for walking us through this. It's a complex situation, but I feel like we have a much better handle on the stakes now.
My pleasure. It's always good to connect the dots.
And thank you to all of you for diving deep with us. We will catch you on the next one. Stay curious.